All right, so due to semi-popular demand, I have decided to make a tutorial showing anybody who would like to learn how to make their very own cloth face mask. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to need a sewing machine, obviously, two pieces of cloth. They should be measured about 6.5 inches long and 9 inches wide. So those are the measurements that I use. I found that that's kind of the best fit for multiple people to use it. Um, this fabric is a bit missized, but we're gonna cut it down afterwards. So if you're working with me and you're getting my fabric, just keep in mind that the flannel is like the correct size. So this is the one that's 6.5 by 9 inch. The cotton is a little bit oversized. That's kind of the consequence of having multiple people cut your fabric, but just cut it down. So I'm using one piece of flannel and one piece of cotton because that provides kind of the best combination of filtration and also comfort, which is very important, and also fit. But you can use, if you just have two pieces of cotton at home, that works just as well. So you're also going to need two strips of elastic. These are also 6.5 inches. They should be about between, these are 1/4 inch wide, but you can get them, it's actually better if you get them a bit narrower because it's a bit more comfortable. But yeah, anything from like 1/4 inch downward works. Also gonna need some scissors, obviously, and some safety pins. So those should be pretty easy to find. Okay, so step one. You're gonna wanna place your fabric. If you have patterns, you're gonna wanna have the pattern kind of facing inward towards each other. Stack them on top of each other like so. Lift this little flap, and you're gonna wanna basically put the elastic on the inside and put each corner, each end of the elastic on one corner of the fabric. And we're gonna take a pin and we're gonna pin it into place like so. Boom. And we're gonna do the same thing for this side. This end goes to this corner. Take there, pin there. Pin it down, okay. And we're just gonna do the same thing for the other side. Simple first step. So right there again, corner to end, corner, pin, and down. You could also use like little clips to pin them into place. There are like specialized fabric clips, but I don't have those. I probably should get them. But yeah, these work. These little anything that you could use to just kind of pin it into place and just keep it from jiggling around. So yeah, as you can see, this is a bit missized. We're gonna cut it down once we're done sewing. You can cut it down now, but I just prefer to do it after we've sewn. So once you have your machine set up, if you want to set up your machine, if you don't know how, just find the make, the manufacturer. It's usually on like somewhere on here. You should be able to find the name of the model, and there's usually some pretty great instructional guides that come with the sewing machines you can find on YouTube and stuff. So just look that up. It's pretty simple to set it up. But I'm just gonna assume that you guys do have it set up. So we're gonna sewing by putting our presser foot kind of 2/3 of the way down of our short side. We're gonna put the presser foot down and make sure that the elastic is kind of out of the way, the presser foot, so that the stitch doesn't prematurely hit it. And we're just gonna sew right across here. Once it's here, you're going to want to back stitch. So that's basically where you press this lever and then you hit the foot pedal. You'll be able to sew backwards. So like that. And we're going to go back across. Go back again. I like to do this about 3 or 4 times just to make sure that the elastic is really sticking down there. Once we got here, make sure the needle is in here. Lift the presser foot. The presser foot lever is like right here usually. Pretty easy to spot. Turn 90 degrees and make sure that you always put the presser foot down before you start sewing. Otherwise, it's just gonna really mess up your piece that you're working on. We're just gonna sew straight across. Make sure that your seam allowance is pretty narrow on these long straights, and seam allowance is basically the distance from the needle, where the needle is, to the edge of the fabric. So on these kind of long stretches, make sure that that's pretty narrow. I'll get into why a little bit later. There's multiple reasons. Again, we're going to backstitch. I like to do it 4 times. Another little tip is if you're ever close to the edge or close, like if you're a little bit over, you could use this lever to control the needle to kind of make some fine movements. So that's something you could do if you're not quite at the edge, or if you're a little bit over the edge, you need to go backwards, but you don't want to press the foot lever and then it'll like destroy everything. So now we're just going to go across again. I like to slow down when I get here just to make sure that everything's in place. Beforehand, the elastic is at the corner, and everything is fun and dandy. Backstitch a couple of times. Again, we're going to use this to make sure that we're going to use this little circular control to make sure that the needle is close and we have a nice narrow seam allowance. And then we are just going to go across here again. Again, we're going to make sure that the seam allowance is pretty narrow on this. And then make sure that that's there, corner to end. Back stitch. Make sure that it's inside. Rotate. We're not going to go all the way down. You're only going to go to about 1/3 of the way down, maybe even shorter. Lift the presser foot, take it out, scissors, and snip. And there's always going to be little loose pieces of string at your start points and your end points, so just make sure that you snip those off once you're done sewing. We're going to cut this bad boy down because I'm a big dum-dum and cutting was a little off. This is Larry, by the way. He's my buddy, my lint buddy that I just keep with me. Yeah, he's a real trooper. He eats up all my excess lint and string. He's my best friend. But, alright, so yeah, we have our, make sure that all the stitches are on both sides and they're clean and they're not like, you know, one side has a stitch and the other side doesn't, so it creates a hole. That can sometimes happen. But yeah, this looks pretty solid, so we're going to basically use this hole and we're going to turn the mask inside out. And so now we have a nice looking face mask, but we're not quite done yet. So make sure that you pull these out completely and they're not like impacted inside. What I mean by like, it's like this. Make sure that you don't sew while it's in this position. It's like pulled out. It's kind of hard to see sometimes if it's all the way out or not. So yeah, we have this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this little flap here. We're going to fold here and here. We're going to kind of fold this on top of each other. We're going to seal this hole. So back to our sewing machine. Ugh. Mistakes can happen, even with a master such as myself. Press it back down, and we're just gonna sew right on across. Snip. That's a little annoying, that's fine. So yeah, now we have our almost completed face mask. Now we're going to make the pleats. The pleats are kind of like this kind of segmented part of the mast that allows it to expand, and then you could fold it back up for storage. So we're going to do that next. Pretty simple. It's as simple as it looks, actually. You're just going to want to fold it into those pleat-like formations, like so. There's no real length that I use to make the pleats. I just kind of eyeball it. But in general, what I like to do is I like to line both pleats up so that they're kind of lined up next to each other, because that makes it real nice looking and easy to fold back up, in my experience. So just do that for both sides. And this is kind of like a rough estimate of where the pleats are going to go, so we're definitely going to adjust this. So if it seems a little bit, butch, don't worry about it. We're going to adjust this. Put your pins in place, like so. Like that. Again, this is very rough. It looks like garbage right now. This is not the exact positions that the pleats are going to be. We're going to make them much more even once we actually are sewing. So, once we have your pleats, go to whatever side you started on. Should generally be the first side that you start sewing the pleats, just because that's going to be the more even one. The other ones, this is obviously not very even. So in that case, this is our right side, so we're going to start on the right side. Press your foot down. Try to get a pretty narrow seam allowance here, just so that it looks real clean. And make sure that none of the pleats are kind of doing this kind of action. Make sure they're very straight. Hold the pleats down. Try to go kind of slow. Put it down. And then we're just going to go around across. You'll notice I'm not really pushing when I'm sewing. I'm just kind of letting the sewing machine do the work for me. You don't really need to force it to do much. It'll just kind of go on its own. If you do try to force it, it'll go like way off course. So just trust the machine. The foot presser will move it forward on its own, and you just kind of need to use your hand to just kind of not even put any pressure on it, just guide it. So make sure that readjust these. I like to just take the pins out and just redo the pleats entirely. I honestly just put these pleats just so that these will stay straight when I'm sewing on here, and then I just readjust them. Make sure that this is even and straight. Press it down. I like to stop right before we get here, just to make sure that the pleat is completely underneath the presser foot. Uh-oh. That got disconnected. I'm gonna cut this. That can happen on occasion. It's fine. We make quick repairs. So yeah, I'm probably gonna cut this part, but in case I don't, make sure that there's an adequate amount of loose string on your top needle, because otherwise the string will just kind of fall out. Uh-oh, there's a little gay boy right here. Yeah, I'm definitely cutting this part out. It's fine. Alright, there we go. Over here, yeah, make sure that you have this kind of long area, because when the needle pulls up, it kind of takes a bit of string with it. So if you have a kind of shorter string on your needle, then it'll pull it back through the needle, and it'll take out the string entirely. So just make sure that doesn't happen. Alright, so we're going to go through there. Again, we're just going to keep our needle down, and we're going to redo our pleat here.
Make sure that this is nice and even. Press a foot down. Again, rechecking that it's even. Back it across a little bit. Turn. And again, I'm not adjusting it or moving it, I'm just letting the machine do the work for me. Backwards a little bit, and we're just going to close off this little hole right here. You don't honestly need to go across the top here. It's just kind of for aesthetic and so that it looks like coherent. But yeah, just snip off all the loose kind of fabrics that we have here. And yeah, so there's our face mask. Very nice and comfortable. Put it on. Provides you with a lot of comfort. Nice and good fit. Remember that fit is having a good fitting face mask is the most important part of the face mask. So more than the material and more than anything else, having the fit is the most important part. So when you're making one of these for yourself or for a family member or a friend, make sure that it's fitting to their face properly, and you don't have these little like these kind of gaps that kind of appear, kind of look like that. This is fine though. It's pretty great. But yeah, if you want to make a face mask, or if you have any questions, leave them in the comments or DM me on Instagram, Masks4medics. Other than that, thank you very much for sitting through this awful tutorial, and have fun making masks.